welcome to my channel. This is Jay from Coding with Jaybird, where I upload weekly tutorials to help build your confidence in coding. Today we're going to learn how we can change our CSS styling using JavaScript. Let's get started, shall we? Today's tutorial is going to be a bit different. I have this changing-css HTML file, which you can see in the live server on the right, and I have a style sheet with some minimal styling. So we're not actually going to touch the style sheet at all. We're going to use our main.js to apply CSS styling using strictly JavaScript. So totally different than what we've done before, and it's quite a lot of fun. So let's get started. I'm just going to get rid of all of these on the side, and let's focus on our main.js. Now, first things first, let's say I want to add a background. Right now it's pretty plain, it just looks white. So let's say I want to add, I don't know, a color or give it a background image. Now, in my IMG folder, I actually have an image called snow, and I quite like this image. So let's use this as a background image. So I'm going to do this by saying document. So I'm going to target the document object, the body property, and then the style property. Now this is just like accessing the CSS styles. And if we want to change the background, we can simply say background equals, and now on the right side, we're going to pass in a string. And this string is exactly what we would normally write in our CSS on the right side of the colon. So we would have background, colon, and then something on the right. And that something would look like this. So we'd have a URL. And here I'm just going to reference the IMG path snow.jpg, and I'll say no repeat. Oops, I'm forgetting to finish my ending of the string from my file pathing. So when I save it, there you can see we've got snow in the background. So we're actually able to style our CSS using JavaScript. All right, now let's say I want to change my H1 because you can see it's black and it doesn't really look that nice. So let's change the inner HTML as well as the styling for our H1. So again, we're going to reference the document object, and we can say get elements by tag name. Now this is probably not something I've shown you before. So I can actually reference the different tags or elements in my HTML file. So I want to reference the H1 tag. Now, because there could be many H1s, this is an array, so I need to pass in the value of which array item do I want to reference. Well, the first one, I only have the one, and array started 0, so we need to put in 0. Dot, and I want to change its inner HTML, so I'll write inner HTML equals a string value. And here I just want to say make these flowers bloom, and that's about it. And you can see we've changed that in our browser. Now, let's say I want to change the color to something a bit more vibrant so it pops against that purple. Again, I'll reference the document object, and I'll say get elements by tag name. This time I'll reference H1 just like above, and it'll be the 0 array item. And now I'm not going to say inner HTML, but this time I'm going to write style because I want to reference the style property. And what style do I want to change? Well, specifically, I want to change its text color, which is written with the style property color. This equals, again, a string value. So I'll just write a color, cyan. And you can see it's made it nice and bright. So we have a nice, bright, vibrant blue popping up against our purple snowing background. Okay, great. So now let's say we want to make these flowers bloom. So how do we make our flowers bloom? Well, first, let's start by targeting each one of these. So if we go into our HTML file, let's see what I've called them. So I've given this first image an ID of Daisy, so that would be our image that's at the top. And then our second image, I've given an ID of Rose. Let's go ahead and target these two and create a variable that's going to store this location first. So we'll say let Daisy equals document. So document object dot get element by, not elements, oops, by ID. And now I'm going to reference Daisy. So all I've done here is I've stored that location of the ID of Daisy, meaning the first image, in a variable called Daisy. And we're going to do the same thing for the Rose ID. So we'll say, oops, document.get element by ID, and we'll reference the row's ID. Now this hasn't really done anything. All we've done is we've created reference points. So now I want to say, well, let's change the image. Well, if you're changing the image, you're changing the source of the image. So we would say daisy.src for source equals, and we just pass in the string value of the new source attribute. So now the new file pathing would be img folder, and we're going to say bloomed-daisy.jpg. And when I save it, watch what happens next. It's changed our image to a blooming daisy. Perfect. So we're actually able to change the source attribute using JavaScript as well. Again, pretty cool. So let's do the same thing with rows. And we'll say rows equals, or rather rows.src, or the source attribute, equals, and the file pathing will be img/bloomed-rows.jpg. And again, we can see we've made the image change from a closed rows to a bloomed rows. So let's do some more CSS styling, but using JavaScript. Let's start by adding a border to our flowers section. So I've wrapped these two flowers in a section, as you can see here, and I've given that section an ID of flowers. So first things first, let's target that flowers, and we'll say let flowers equals document.get element by ID, and we'll target flowers ID. And now we can reference that flowers, and again we'll say dot, and what property we want to change is the style property. So flowers.style dot, and what specifically do we want to change in the CSS styling? Well, we want to change the border. So we simply write border equals, and now we pass in a string value of what would normally go in our CSS styling. So I'll just say 6 pixels, dotted, since that kind of looks cool with the snow background, hot pink. When I save that, you can see we've got this nice, pretty hot pink dotted border around our section called flowers. Now let's say I want to change the margin. Right now these two images are kind of stuck together and I don't really like that. So if I want to add a margin to Daisy, again, I can reference Daisy since we've already created Daisy in line 9 and we've referenced the ID of Daisy. So Daisy dot, again, the style property dot, and what do I want to change? Well, specifically just the bottom margin. So it's written a little differently. We don't use dashes here, so it's not going to be margin dash bottom. It's going to be margin capital B bottom. And this is going to equal, let's say I want to make it 3 rems, just to have some change and some gap between the two. And now we do. Okay. So let's say we also want to style this first flower by giving it a border radius, because right now it looks kind of sharp with these boxy edges. So let's say we want to style the first flower, and we'll do this by saying document.get elements by tag name. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Tag name. And now this time I want to reference the images. So I'll say the img tags. Now, which image do I want to target? Specifically the first image. And obviously there's not going to be one image. When there's multiple elements by tag name, it's an array. And since I want to get the first one, I'll write 0. Dot. Now I want to update the style property. Dot. And more specifically, I just want to give it a border radius so it doesn't look like these sharp pointy edges. So I'll say border, and again, instead of a dash radius, I'll use a capital R for radius, and I'll just set that to a string value of something like, let's say 10 pixels. And there you can see we've got some nice smoothed out rounded edges on this first image, which looks pretty nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and style our second flower. Now I could have changed the border radius for that first flower simply by accessing the daisy variable and saying daisy.style.border radius. And the reason I didn't do that is I'm just trying to show you more examples where I use get elements by tag name so we can practice different ways of using the tag names and the arrays that follow. Okay, so if we want to style the second flower, Let's create a variable that's going to store the second flower. And again, we'll do that with our get elements by tag name. Now, technically, we have already done that. We could use rows, but again, let's just practice our get elements by tag name. So we'll say let second flower equal document dot get elements by tag name. And here we're going to pass in the tag, so an img tag. And again, we need to have an array. And which item in the array will it be? Will it be the second one? So second one would be item number 1, since the array starts at 0. Okay, and now we can say second flower dot style dot border radius, just like we did above. And this time I'll set it to something a lot larger so it looks like a perfectly round circle. And I'll say 200 pixels. So it looks nice and different. And now let's say I want to give this a box shadow as well. So once again, I would just reference second flower dot style dot box shadow equals, and now in my CSS, I want to give it some values for the box shadow. So I'll just say 6 pixels, 6 pixels, 100 pixels, and let's say lavender so it looks like a little bright up against the dark purple. Uh-oh, why is this not working? What have I done wrong? Let's ask our handy debugging duck, Tim. Did I make a mistake? So second flower dot style, that looks good, dot box shadow equals 6 pixels, 6 pixels, 100 pixels, lavender. That part's good. Oh, it's our box shadow. Okay, the B is a capital B. That needs to be a lowercase b. And now when I save that, we can see our box shadow. Perfect. That's it for today's video on changing CSS with JavaScript. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so you can be notified of new videos as I upload them every week. Don't forget, keep on coding.